Welcome to everyone. I hope the rest of you are in the correct one, the one that you want to be. As was mentioned, if you feel that you wish to be in one of the other sessions, at the bottom of the screen you'll find a red button where you can leave, go back to the plenary, and then type into the chat which subplenary you would like to join. As in the plenary, just a little housekeeping, I would ask that everybody who's not speaking to mute themselves. Here the chat has chat to everyone, so there is no private chat to anybody. So just be aware of that. And otherwise, I will get started. Move the screen here. And yeah. So my name is George Stiff. I work in the IUC coordination unit, and I'm joined here by my colleague Arthur Hinch, who will be co-moderating with me, and you'll hear from him later on. He'll be, in particular, consolidating your questions as they come into the chat. So feel free to write any questions you have into the chat, and we'll try to get to them. So, as mentioned, this is going to be interpreted into Chinese. I'm not sure that we actually have anybody. I hope that they're not still awake in China, but they're still more than welcome to be here. We have an hour here, and although we are running a little bit behind, so it's possible that they will cut us off soon, but they should send us a message to let us know that's the case. So, as you all should know, that this is the session for ensuring the energy transition really is just and not just about energy. So, you can kind of guess from a little bit of wordplay in English from the title, what we're talking about here is that the energy transition should be equitable and not only about energy issues as at the forefront. Because when we talk about an energy transition, it's clear that we want to talk about efficiency and technologies and savings and consumption, more renewables, smarter mobility, and less fossil fuels. But the problem is that a lot of times the technical issues overshadow some of the socioeconomic aspects and the fact that we need people. We want these people to be motivated to do their part to the transition. And we also want to make sure that communities aren't left behind. So this means that we're going to be looking at a strong impact the energy transition can have on jobs and how it will affect different demographic groups in diverse ways. We want to ensure that the transition does not come at the expense of vulnerable groups, but instead adds to their overall health, their welfare, and creates jobs for them in sectors with a bright future. We want the energy transition to be just. Now, I have to say that the just transition has been around for a long time. I believe it has its roots in North America, especially in the labor movement, but now it's getting increasing focus also in the climate energy sectors. While many people agree that equity and justice really do need to be integrated into policy, it's not always agreed what are the priorities that should be set, nor is it always agreed what even is defined as just. So, for example, in the European Commission, they have the Just Transition Initiative, which is very oriented towards coal extracting and carbon-intensive regions. But this might not be always the case, even across Europe. And also in other parts of the world, they might focus on other aspects of justness, about focusing on the effects on poor people, or imbalanced effects on women or the elderly, or any other number of socioeconomic aspects that are justifiable to explore. So here in our panel, as you can see on the screen, we have 4 excellent city examples, 3 from Europe and 1 from North America, which have each faced their own challenges in transitioning their communities. But they're here to offer some of the solutions that they've come up with and some of the lessons they've learned along the way. Our collective hope is that all of you will be able to take something valuable away from here and apply it to your own communities. So we're not necessarily offering definitive solutions, but we do want to find something that maybe fits to each one of you, so that you can each be a little bit more just than before. So here's somebody on their microphone on. Okay, so Arthur, if you keep a check on that. So in any case, the first one I would like to introduce would be Markus PLIESSNIG, who is head of Communication International Affairs in Essen, Germany. Essen is paired with Koriyama, Japan, who some of you might have heard spoke earlier in the day about smart solutions. Mr. PLIESSNIG will be talking about Essen's role in the coal transition of the Ruhr in Germany and structural changes in innovation that were required for it to become a green capital. So, Markus, over to you. I can move your slides. Just tell me when to move next.
So, okay. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Would you please show the first slide? I can't see the slides, the charts right now.
Is anyone else having this problem? I've shared it on the screen. Can people see the slides?
And we see just the first slide, the city of Essen as a model for structural change. Now we can see it, yeah.
Okay. Okay, because this morning sometimes people were not able to see the slides, so please let me know.
So unfortunately, I can't see my slides, so it's a little bit difficult to present at the moment. Is it possible that I can share my...
Sure, you can share your screen. That's also
yeah, I will try this. No, isn't possible.
One moment, I might have to make you...
Yeah.
Technology.
So I take the time to thank you very much on behalf of the city of Essen for allowing me to give you this brief insight into our history, present, and future of the city today.
You should be able to share right now.
No, unfortunately.
Well, you have the ball at the moment, so that means that you are the presenter. There's no share at the bottom.
No, doesn't work.
Komm zu mir, dann machst du bei mir.
Oh.
Okay.
Dann steuern die und du filmst bei mir.
Geht's bei dir?
Bei mir sieht man es.
Ah, okay. I will go to my colleague Go Tyson to his computer and try it there.
Okay. He said that you could hear him or you could see the slides, so I will just share mine again.
So, okay, I could see his screen, so I will give over to Mr. PLIESSNIG. Yes.
Bin ich da eingefroren? So I can see my slides right now, and you can hear me, or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You just tell me next.
So the title of this short presentation is City of Essen as a Model for Structural Change. But as you might know, it's not easy to present 50 years of industrial history in 5 minutes. So I will concentrate on very typical examples. Could you please go to the next slide? Yes. We're at the heart of Europe. The city of Essen is in the heart of Europe and the Ruhr metropolis, which is a region with approximately 5.1 million inhabitants. Next, please. So we are the second largest city in the Ruhr area. We're the fourth largest city in our state, North Rhine-Westphalia. We are the ninth largest city in Germany, and Essen has got 590,000 inhabitants. Next, please. So we've got some headquarters of big companies in Essen. 9 of the 100 top-selling companies are located in Essen, have their headquarters in Essen, and if you might heard of ThyssenKrupp, Aldi, Hochtief, very big companies located in Essen. So this all sounds very good, but if you could show the next slide. But this shows the end of coal mining. It was in 2018, the last mine in the Ruhr area has been closed. Our Prime Minister Steinmeier has been there and The coal from the Ruhr was a foundation for Germany's industrialization and its rise to become a major political power. The black gold created prosperity. Coal was the economic miracle of the young Federal Republic, and it was also an emotional moment, as you might see, for there are always values that still characterize the people of the Ruhrgebiet today. Straightforwardness, decency, solidarity, togetherness. And I think that these values helped us changing the structures. But what about the minus? The next, please. Almost 4,000 people still work for RAG, Ruhrkohle AG, the holding company of the local coal industry. This number has been steadily declining since the 1960s. In the post-war period, the industry employed over 600,000 people here in this region. Over the past 20 years, the RAG has shed 85,000 jobs. Of these, some 45,000 miners have, and that's very important, have retired or taken early retirement, and the remaining employees have been placed in very different sectors. Former miners now work for professional fire brigades, railways, at airports, or as male nurses. And if you please the next one. And on this chart, you can see what makes Essen so special for me. On the left side, you can see a photo from the beginning of the 20th century. It shows a part of a Krupp steel factory, the former biggest employer in Essen. And for me, it's a symbol. This image symbolizes the city of that time when Essen was characterized by coal, industry, and steel. And on the right-hand side, you can see Essen as it is today. You've got green, you've got culture. It's a big theater on the left side. And you also see the power of economy. It's somehow a kind of skyline. We call it skyline. It's not like New York or Tokyo or whatever. But it was a first skyline in Germany before Frankfurt. And so this picture symbolizes or is a picture of Essen it is today. The next one, please. How did the city of Essen achieve this? And now you can click, please. So by education and innovation, culture, and green infrastructure and green economy. So please let me start with education and innovation, because to my opinion, education and innovation are the main drivers of change in this area. My next slide, please. Until 1965, there were no students in this region. And I really mean no students in this region. But there were still around 300 people employed in the Ruhr mining industry. And in 1972, our university in Essen, and in Duisburg, which is near to Essen, has been founded. And I also studied at this university in Essen and in Lyon in France. But as you can see, education and innovation are the drivers of the change. Education instead of mining, workers' children at universities, that was the motto of these days. Because skilled workers were needed for the structural change that was due. That's the situation today. We've got 21 universities and colleges of higher education, 50 non-university research facilities, about 220,000 students, a lot of them from abroad. And the next one, please. Because we knew we had to educate young people that they can improve our highly dynamic economy. And these are the markets we're in today: industrial power, green economy, digital health, urban development, and some sectors. And which means we educate the people we need for modern economy today. And this change began in the 60s. Next one, please. So many people, even in Germany, still believe that the sky is always black or gray in Essen. That's, of course, nonsense. Essen was European Green Capital in 27 and has earned this title. And I had the pleasure to be the spokesperson of this year when Essen was European Green Capital. And what were the reasons? Why did we become this European Green Capital? Next, please. Essen, for the EU Commission, Essen serves as a model for European cities undergoing structural change. The successful transformation of coal and steel, and you might remember the picture on the left side, and steel into the greenest city in NRW. Next one, please. Some examples, what did we do from the 60s, the creation of green spaces, water areas, food paths and cycle paths, and regions has been part of urban development since the 70s in the sense of a strategy of integrated adaptation to climate change. I'll give you one example, the river Emsche, which was really a dirty river, and perhaps it was the dirtiest river on earth, has now been converted from open wastewater flows, as you see on the left picture, to near natural streams, a project for generations. The next one, please. So when we talk about green infrastructure and green economy, it doesn't only mean to plant, but it also means that we have a green economy here today. We've got about 13,000 employees in the lead market, resource efficiency, which means renewable energy and so on. And we've got an increase in the number of employees since 2017 of 2.5%, which is above the German average of it. And we founded a industry initiative, which is called Green Tech Ruhr, with 111 companies in the region, which are working strongly together and trying to support themselves. Next one, please. The third point, after education and innovation and green infrastructure, for me is culture. We also have been European Capital of Culture in 2010, and the claim was change through culture, culture through change. And for me, this year of European Capital of Culture was an initial spark for the whole Ruhr area. So I've got on the next chart, I've got one symbol for this, and this is Zollverein, which was once the world's most productive coal mine, but today it combines education and innovation, culture and green infrastructure on one point, which means now this Zollverein is UNESCO World Cultural Heritage. It has university and a research campus on it. It offers space for offices and startups, and it has a green park, landscape, biodiversity, and so it's one point which combines all. So please let me go to the last chart, which is important for me, because structural change is what we call a painful process of adaptation. The more than 5 million people in this region have been living through and suffering this process for almost 2 generations now. A lot has been achieved, something has failed, but nothing is finished, and that's the most important for me. So we call Essen as a city on the move. We have to go on, we have to move on and call ourselves a city on the move. So I think 5 minutes, I don't know if perhaps it has been 7 minutes, but it's okay.
Yeah. So I'll just ask you maybe a quick question as a follow-up. You talked about the workers and the miners and the tearfulness, and of course very justified. Were there examples of where reskilling wasn't possible or where it didn't work, and what did you do in these cases?
Yes, of course there were these examples, and of course we still have a very high unemployment rate in Essen, and in this region is about 10%. It's or at the moment I think it's about 11%, which is double of the German average. So we still have problems with it. It's not so golden, and we try again to get people in jobs, and I think we are good in this, but we still have this high unemployment rate.
Thank you for that.
A big problem of the whole region.
Yes, yes, indeed. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to move on to our next. We hope to have some time for questions later on, but I'll move to the next, being Elizabeth Mitchell, who is the Policy and Partnerships Manager in Manchester City in England and the United Kingdom, and Manchester is paired with Montreal, Canada. Ms. Mitchell will be focusing on the city's role in zero carbon ambitions and how that plays into their work for creating a more inclusive economy, which includes retrofitting housing and addressing fuel poverty. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I haven't been able to view the slides so far. George, could I ask you maybe to share them, and I'll try and make sure my speaking is aligned to them.
Okay, I'm sharing them now.
That's great. Thank
you very much. I'm on the first challenges slide.
That's great. Thank you. So, Manchester is a city in the northwest of England, and we're probably best known globally for football. We have rapidly transformed over the past 25 years, and we've seen huge economic growth in our city, huge population growth, regeneration and new development. However, we've got some entrenched social and economic challenges here in the city that we still face and must work to overcome them. So the ones I've selected here are ones that have a specific link to climate change. So first of all, housing. Manchester has a housing stock that is primarily Victorian brick terrace houses, many of which are very poorly insulated and cost a lot to heat. And we also have a very large private rented sector, which means that we don't have a lot of influence, and we have limited incentives to address the housing quality in our city. And we also have quite high levels of fuel poverty because of that stock. Health. Manchester, unfortunately, has the highest rate of preventable health conditions in the UK, with our residents developing them in their 50s. And in particular, we have a very high rate of respiratory conditions. So, of course, as well as this being a large social issue, the poor health of our residents is a drag on our economic productivity. Manchester's seen a huge increase of employment in recent years, especially in key growth sectors. Whilst this has really driven the city's economic growth and attracted many people to come and live in our city, many of Manchester's residents have not been able to access the newly created jobs here. And this is mainly due to lack of qualifications and not having the right skills to access those new jobs. And we're worried that this will only increase with some of the carbon intensive sectors shrinking as we aim to become zero carbon. And finally, transport. Whilst Manchester has a large public transport system, it's not integrated. So, for example, you have to buy a separate ticket for the access to local buses, and then another ticket if you want to access the local metro. And there's also some parts of our city where it doesn't directly link the housing neighbourhoods to the main employment sites. And as this is more expensive and it doesn't necessarily provide the direct connections to access work, we have a high amount of private car use, which is both detrimental to the environment, but also health via air quality impacts. Next slide, please. So what solutions are we implementing? Manchester is fully committed to achieving its zero carbon future, and we've set a science-based target via a carbon budget of being zero carbon by 2038. But we realise this cannot be at the expense of the other social and economic challenges I just outlined. So as such, we're actually looking to use the opportunities of addressing climate change to also address these challenges and thereby ensure a just transition. Our ambitions in this are detailed in the Manchester Climate Change Framework, and this is a citywide document developed by the Climate Change Partnership, which is a group of over 60 members from across 10 sectors that have direct responsibility for over 20% of the city's CO2 emissions and influence over the other 80%. The framework has 4 main objectives listed on the slides for the next 5 years. And whilst you can see that first and foremost this is to address climate change, social issues such as health and also inclusive economy are embedded at the heart of this. So we're now in the process of starting to implement this framework, including via our recovery response to COVID-19. So some of the measures that we are looking at as part of this include housing retrofit. So we are just starting the first phase of a 15-year programme, which will develop innovative retrofit measures to address residential properties, which is scalable alongside existing investment plans. This will include solutions developed for a range of property types, and the works will transition properties away from a reliance on gas heating, achieved through fabric retrofit and renewable technologies. Now, this is going to be led by a partnership of 17 social housing providers in the city to really try and make headway where we do have that influence. And as well as moving towards less and cleaner energy, retrofitting these properties will make a dramatic impact on fuel poverty, especially in our most deprived communities. Green space. We're going to be investing over £100 million in 6 central green spaces, which will completely transform and update our city's physical environment. As well as biodiversity gains, this will provide more space for our residents to exercise and socialise, and will create employment opportunities in the creation of them. Active travel. We're investing in a number of cycling and walking improvement schemes to enable our residents to use this as a safe alternative to private cars. We're also developing active travel hubs, which provide a combination of safe, secure cycle parking, electric vehicle charging points, and facilities for cycle hire schemes in existing multi-storey car parks in the centre to try and support changing patterns of travels. And of course, this will have health benefits as well as reducing our carbon emissions. And finally, reskilling. So alongside these infrastructure investment programmes, we're developing complementary skills initiatives to support long-term investment into zero carbon climate resilience activities. So we're working with many educational providers across the city to ensure that Manchester's residents can reskill to access the newly created employment opportunities in our growing green economy. Next slide, please. So finally, the lessons we've learned from this work to date. These are just some that I thought might be useful to share. So first of all, setting a target. By setting a science-based target for being zero carbon, we've really managed to drive the ambition on this agenda across the city. I think it's really important to see zero carbon and energy transition as a cross-cutting theme, including this as a holistic ambition in every strategy in the city. It means that it's fully embedded in social and economic policy too, which will really support a just transition. Working in partnership is crucial. A just transition requires all of the city's partners to work towards a zero carbon future. Creating a partnership board allows influence to be driven across all spheres of the city and will ultimately make the target achievable whilst assuring that all the residents' needs are met and taken into consideration. Pilot projects. So Manchester's taken part in a number of programmes that have really demonstrated environmental impact whilst also having tangible social impacts. So really good example of this is our work on the Grow Green project, which has created a new sponge park in West Gorton, which is one of the most deprived areas of our city. Investment proposals. Having a portfolio of ideas at the ready has meant that we can quickly seize any funding opportunities that arise, such as the housing retrofit programme I mentioned before. And finally, language. I think it's fair to say that not everyone understands or is driven by the environmental aspects of transition. By stressing both the social and economic benefits of it, we will bring more people along whilst also achieving these aims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, please remember to write them into the chat. I have to turn on my video so you can see me. Just a quick question from our side, also because we're short on time, but because of the fact that increasing attention is being paid to community engagement and carbon literacy, and how do you do it in Manchester to ensure that citizens from all kinds of demographic groups are thoroughly engaged?
So we have a number of different ways that we tackle this. The first thing to say is that as a council, as an organisation ourselves, we've been working on carbon literacy within our own organisation for a number of years in conjunction with Manchester Metropolitan University, one of the city's 2 very large universities. So we already have a programme that's rolled out, and that has now been shared with those organisations in the Manchester Partnership, those 60 organisations. So they are now training up all of their staff, but also all of the people they work with, and that includes a lot of our residents as well. We have a significant programme of work going on in our schools and university, so anyone who comes to study in the city has to do a mandatory module on carbon literacy. So that means everyone coming to the city is taking that. And the final thing to say is that we have a very dedicated communications campaign. And when we are doing any engagement with our residents, our climate messages are embedded as part of that to try and change behaviour. We recognise it's not going to happen overnight, and it is by building on those things that residents really care about. So, for example, we've seen a real shift in Manchester with more and more of our residents using their local parks and wanting to cycle to avoid kind of shared car use during COVID-19. So we're now trying to build on that behaviour change, which has actually been as a result of something else, but will also have positive environmental impact.
Thank you for that. I see in the chat that Eduard, one of our speakers, coming up as a question, but we'll park that for now. Arthur, you can bring that forward. And I know Eduard will be talking about some of these same issues in his own presentation. So thank you, Elizabeth. Next is Melissa JORT-CONWAY, who is a planner for climate change and resiliency in Ottawa, Canada, which is paired with Malmö, Sweden, and IUC. She's here to talk about how Canada's national capital is setting a positive example across the whole country and worldwide for how to manage communities' growth both sustainably and inclusively, but still keeping things oriented towards climate action. Melissa. Are you there? I saw you on the... You're muted, perhaps? No, you're correct. Just speak now. No, I can't hear you. Am I the only one? I guess not. I can see your lips moving.
No, we cannot hear her. You're right.
Okay. So, you are set up, it seems, correctly, according to this. Maybe select your microphone to make sure that the microphone is actually set up to your headset. And if not, then we can jump forward to Eduard, but we'll give Melissa a moment to see. No, it doesn't seem to be. I don't know what you're saying. I'm sorry. So Melissa, please check out your headset. Check it in the audio settings. There's down below under next to the microphone. There's settings, and you can select the different microphones and speakers on your system. So maybe you can find the correct setting on the bottom left next to the microphone mute unmute button. In the meantime, I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I will switch over to Eduard directly, and he can talk about Barcelona. Hopefully.
All right.
Yes, we hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. So let me introduce you first. So Eduard CABRÉ is international relations consultant in housing in Barcelona, paired with New York City as well as with China. And he's here to talk about Barcelona's famous efforts in the housing sector, which in particular relate to energy poverty and renovations for both public and private housing, and also keeping citizens and tenants in the forefront. So the floor is yours. I can move those slides for you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. Since we're short on time, I'm going to go straight to the point. I'm going to be focusing on housing, since this was the topic that New York City and Barcelona focused on in the framework of the IUC partnership. But if you have any questions in relation to Barcelona's sustainability strategy as a whole, I can also try to answer those. So if we look at the housing challenges that the city is facing, also in connection to our sustainability strategies, the first issue we're facing relates to energy sources, right? And this is common to other sectors of the economy and other sectors of the city. But in the housing and residential sector, we are still too dependent on non-renewable energies, right? So there's a focus there to shift from non-renewable to renewable sources. But this obviously takes time and connects to many other areas of the city and the economy as a whole. In the housing area specifically, we have a challenge connected to energy efficiency of our aging housing stock. As you can see, most of our housing stock was built between 1950 and the 1980s. and only a small portion of it is from the last 30 years. So we have and we are indeed accelerating our renovation efforts to make sure that we bring all of these older houses up to the current standards. We also have a challenge connected to financing, and this challenge is twofold. On the one hand, because of our climate, which is quite mild, especially in the winter, we don't necessarily see big energy efficiency savings after doing the renovation works. So this means that our investments don't necessarily result in clear savings in terms of energy consumption and energy demand after renovation. So this is one piece. The second piece has to do with the fragmented property ownership of the housing stock. The most common tenancy in Barcelona is home ownership, which is 60% of the overall housing stock. But also on the other 40% of the housing stock, most of the rental units are owned by owners or landlords that own maybe 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 units. So that means when we work with them to renovate or to provide support to renovate the units, we're dealing with a lot of different owners that manage very small portions of the units. So that there is an issue when it comes to financing all of that. And finally, and this I think is the most relevant to this discussion, is the issue with renovictions or the evictions resulting from these renovation efforts. So when we renovate the units, we know that sometimes this results in an increase in rents or the costs related to these renovations. And this sometimes triggers the evictions of tenants and residents. And we as a city are very much concerned and very much focusing on making sure that doesn't happen. Next slide, please. So how are we ensuring that all of these challenges are being addressed? On the public housing side of things, we as a city make sure that all of the renovations that have to do with improving energy efficiency are publicly funded, and they don't result in an increase in the social rents of our tenants. There is also a clear goal to improve the energy standards in new construction so that in the long term, these units are energy efficient from the beginning. We also look at the carbon footprint when it comes to using certain materials and certain construction techniques. And we also include solar energy in most of our public housing projects, both renovation and new construction. When it comes to the private housing sector, the city provides public subsidies to improve the energy efficiency of the housing stock. We also couple some anti-speculation measures and conditions to accessing these subsidies to make sure that this renovation process doesn't take place. And we also use the city's powers and competences when it comes to permitting and licensing to what we also call housing discipline, to ensure that renovations don't result in illegal evictions of tenants and residents. And finally, we are also using different financing tools, especially through European funds, both existing financing schemes, but also looking at the new Resiliency and Recovery Facility and the European Green Deal financing and funds that might appear. We're very much active in that front, and we think there's a big opportunity there, especially in the housing area. So overall, the principles that guide the different actions are already on your screens. We want to make sure that all housing additional costs are neutral for the residents. We also use public-private partnerships to ensure that the investments that the private stakeholders need to take on are also coupled with some public subsidy to offset any negative externalities in terms of resident impact to the residents. And finally, we also use a territorial approach to make sure that any actions are coupled with actions in the public spaces, the possibility of improving the surroundings, and other types of economic development and facilities in the areas. Next slide. So now I'm going to show some projects that that show some of these initiatives that we're taking. Can Fabra on the top is a renovation project of an existing but already not utilized industrial factory. In this case, we kept the envelope of the building, the brick envelope of the building was renovated, and on the inside, some public housing rental units were built using cross-laminated timber. And you see some pictures of that on the screen. And on the bottom, you can see two cooperatives that have been built in the last few years and months. La Borda on the left is already occupied. It's also a cooperative housing project that was built using cross-laminated timber. And in the center, you see La Balba, which is a project that is still under construction, but will be completed in the next few months. And again, the inclusion of solar panels in most of our public housing and public-private partnerships in housing. Next slide. And then another flagship project, very recent, is the APROP temporary social housing project, which is using shipping containers that have been adapted to become housing units. And in this case, you see the construction process on the left and the finalized building on the right. This is, again, a temporary project that uses shipping containers. It allows to reduce the carbon footprint of the project, also the cost and the time, because the units are built off-site. It obviously involves the circular economy process in its construction, and it's reusable, which means that this project is temporary on this site, but we can take the units and rebuild them in a different site in the city. Next slide. So in terms of the overall lessons that we are taking of these different initiatives, first of all, the public sector needs to play a very active role in ensuring that the private sector does also its part in delivering this greener, more sustainable future, but also in addressing these vulnerable communities that might not have the opportunity to do the works that are needed. So the city needs to be proactive in approaching them and providing the necessary support. In terms of financing, we think there is an important combination that needs to take place between subsidies and rotating financing, so that we make sure to create this virtuous housing renovation cycle that we think is necessary for the machine to work. Thirdly, there is a need to use a carrot and stick. We need to provide subsidies and support, but we also need to ask the private sector to do its part and to avoid any illegal and any speculative practices that might be limiting our ability to deliver on this greener, sustainable agenda. The power of data, we all know it's very important to be able to monitor and track all of the improvements we deliver on the energy transition, so that we account for the great work that we're doing. Circular economy, I think I already referred to that. And finally, the standards. We are aware that the European Union wants to set standards for all cities and all regions, but some Southern European regions don't necessarily use the same standards as Central European. Our climate zones are milder, and so we need to accommodate our needs and our capacities to our own climate zones. And I think that's all from my side.
Thank you very much. Just ask you maybe a quick question as well, and hopefully Melissa has said that her audio might be fixed. But to you, Eduard, what has been the greatest challenge so far in getting different stakeholders involved, people, tenants, housing associations, or even the owners on board, for example, for a retrofit?
Yeah, I think I already referred to that a bit, but I think that the major challenge with tenants, for instance, has been their fear of displacement. So making sure that we set these regulatory frameworks that protect them whenever renovations take place is very important. And somehow a similar challenge happens with small homeowners who also fear that any renovations might make for them to lose control of the process. We want to accompany them in the process of introducing renovations, and we provide a lot of support to these smaller owners. I think bigger owners is a different type of stakeholder, and we play a different game with them. But with smaller owners, we are really proactive in ensuring that they also go through this smooth process.
Thank you for that. So now, Melissa, hopefully you can test it out. Let's see if you can hear you. No, still not. But maybe you can try unplugging.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Good, and it's good. It's a good quality. So I won't spend time introducing you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes. So I will go back in your slides, and then we can start.
I tried to use the headset, and I apologize for that.
And maybe keep it short. I'm not sure yet how long they're going to keep us open since we started a little late in our thing. So I want to give you the full presentation if possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I thank you to Eduard for shifting speakers. My name is Melissa JORT-CONWAY. I am a city planner with the City of Ottawa, which is Canada's capital city. I'm going to give you just a snapshot of Ottawa's efforts to ensure a just energy transition. You're on the second slide there. I just wanted to give a brief introduction about Ottawa, but maybe I should go quickly here. We're the fourth largest city in Canada by population. We reached 1 million people last year, and we are expected to grow to 2 million people by 2046. We've grown from being simply Canada's capital city to a vibrant major Canadian city. And we're becoming a significant point of entry into Canada for immigrants from around the world. Next slide, please. Ottawa faces a number of challenges as it sets out to achieve a just energy transition. The vision Ottawa has set is to become the most livable mid-sized city in North America. We're becoming a more diverse city with an aging demographic. We know that to achieve our vision, that energy will play a critical role in the decisions that we make on how to grow as an energy conscious community. And we will have to acknowledge the needs of all members of our society. So as a strategic direction, the city aims to guide its growth by creating a city of proximities as opposed to a city of distances. Where distances need to be covered, we intend to prioritize sustainable transportation modes, such as transit and access to walking and cycling infrastructure over the use of private vehicles. We've taken a transect approach to our planning by dividing our city into 6 transects that represents different types of built environments and planned functions from the most urban to the most rural. And we have to allow and support a variety of housing typologies and include some that do not even exist today in order to meet our diverse and larger households that are in demand and provide for adequate and affordable housing. We need to align with our aggressive community greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and reduce our emissions 100% by 2050 to align with the Paris Agreement. And we need to take steps to adapt to a changing climate. So the scope and scale that's required to achieve our targets is unprecedented in both action and investment. And there are regulatory barriers that impede the city from action and innovation, either directly through our own operations or in our ability to enact change in the broader community. There are also competing council and departmental priorities and needed changes on the operational mandates of our services, such as transit. We are a very large city. We're 2,800 square kilometers in size. We are larger than the cities of Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton combined. We have one of the largest rural areas of any city in Canada, and this rural area makes up 80% of our city, with approximately 1,000 farming operations. So a just transition is needed to protect our food supplies and protect our agricultural assets as well. Local energy generation through solar and wind generation are going to help ensure that we become energy self-sufficient through local renewable energy sources and also advancing our local economy. Next slide, please. Some of the solutions that we've implemented in the recent months that have passed, Ottawa City Council has taken proactive steps to set us on a path forward to a just transition. They include plans, people, and projects. In January of this year, City Council approved the Climate Change Master Plan, which sets a framework for how Ottawa is going to mitigate and adapt to climate change over the next 3 decades. There are 20 priority projects that will require us to take action, and we've used a comprehensive energy and emissions and finance model to identify what it will take for us to achieve our targets. And those are in 6 different sectors, as shown in the graph to the left: land use and growth management, buildings, which are new and existing, transportation, waste and renewable natural gas, and electricity. So each of those sectors is shown in the chart to the left and what they contribute to reaching our targets. These projects are going to be prioritized with equity and inclusion considerations using our equity and inclusion lens that we've set up at the city. The other critical plan that was just released last week is our draft comprehensive official plan. It's a strategic document that describes the growth and physical development of the city over the next 25 years. The new official plan will be guided by the Climate Change Master Plan priorities. Next slide, please. In terms of our lessons learned, what we've learned so far is that cities cannot act alone in achieving a just transition. It takes collective action to work together to achieve a common purpose. We need champions in all sectors working together, both inside and outside of the city. And there needs to be meaningful collaboration with all groups of society, and including those who are at risk of being excluded. We have to try to break down systemic barriers. That is an essential step to increase accessibility and increase dialogue. We have set up an ambassadors working group as part of our official plan with those that are at risk of exclusion. And we're working with our Center for Social Enterprise Development. We're celebrating our ancestors and our diversity. And lastly, our great teams. We have great teams at the city. We're made up of strong people, but us alone is not enough. And we need other teams to support one another and to build on our successes. I hope that I didn't take too long. I apologize for my delay and the problems with technology. I think I'm going to wrap up, and if there's still time, I can take some questions. Thank you.
Yes, before we open up maybe to the floor, and this would be Arthur stepping in, I just have one question that we had thought of. So you highlight the equity and inclusion lens. So I'm just wanting to know, how is it that Ottawa integrates justness into its policy formation, and how do you define what is just, what is equitable, according to the different demographic groups, or do you have to just end up catering to all of them somehow as the compromise?
So the equity and inclusion lens at the city is used across the corporation as though it is like a pair of glasses. So we use it to help us see things in a new way, to be more effective in our everyday work, and to get a clearer focus or a more complete view. The lens is to be used by everybody. So that includes our city councillors, city staff, our community partners, consultants, and businesses. And we do identify those that are at risk. So there are profiles that have been set up for specific groups that we want to make sure to not exclude if possible. So those systemic barriers have been identified, whether they're geographical barriers, financial barriers, or physical barriers. And we, as part of each of our projects, we have to try to break down those barriers by identifying who the groups are and how we can reach out to them.
And just a quick follow-up on that is the aspects of the lens, are they also included within the master plan and the plan that was released last week?
Yes, it is.
People could find that online?
The draft official plan is online, and you can go in there and you can see how we plan to use the lens to address these groups through our growth and development in the future.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Arthur, who can tell us about, we have 2 minutes left, so very quick, maybe one question then only. Arthur.
Yes, thank you, George. I will use the time to raise the one question from the chat. So I think there was a question raised by Eduard earlier during Elizabeth's presentation. So the question is, how do you work with small companies and individual home owners to implement your strategies? So in this case, I think this refers to the strategies that you're implementing in Manchester. And also since Eduard touched upon and the difference in terms of how you collaborate and engage, smaller and larger actors and smaller, larger homeowners. So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. In terms of the small companies, we're quite lucky in Manchester that we have a couple of organisations that work with individual homeowners in relation to domestic retrofitting. However, I think it's important to state that the UK is a very centralised country, and so a lot of the schemes in relation to retrofit are actually run by our national government, and we then have to implement them locally. So we do that in relation with those kind of small community organisations that really translate what is available and why it's important to our individual homeowners. But that is something that is difficult because of the way our housing sector is structured here, which is partly why we're really focusing on our social housing to try and drive some of that change through the city.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. Looking at the time, George, I think it might be a bit short notice to take up another question. Perhaps I can hand over back to you, George, as the moderator to close.
Yes. So I see that people are putting in their emails the speakers are putting their emails into the chat. I encourage anyone who wants to reach out to them. They can do so. We will also be publishing the slides online, especially for those who are unable to see them. I'm sorry about that. And we will be back in the plenary within 20 seconds now. And we'll be wrapping up with some closing remarks. So I want to thank all of my speakers very much for first accepting and for giving interesting presentations, as well as overcoming some technical difficulties one way or another. This is the world we live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much.